Hi there, everybody. I'm Kraig Kann. Right now, on this edition of Tracks to Success, meet a man who spent a long career around the diamond and now has his heart set on shaping a new story. Not just for him, but for everyone he comes into contact with. He was a communications guy, through and through, at the Major League Baseball level in one of America's best baseball towns, St. Louis, Missouri. 16 years with the Cardinals in various leadership roles. He's still there, St. Louis that is, but now the story is much different. He's communicating the story of others as the founder of his own company, Story Smart. And he's an author, he's a filmmaker, and he's a non-practicing lawyer whose career from here forward will be judged on his value in helping maximize the value of other people and their stories. His name is Ron Watermon, and his story of success starts now.
Welcome to Tracks to Success. This is the podcast that brings you inspiring people and their inspiring stories, how they found their way to the top, and how their path can help you do the same. Here's your host, network broadcaster, C-suite executive, best-selling author, speaker, and entrepreneur, Kraig Kann.
Ron, it's an absolute pleasure to be with you. Thanks so much for joining me here on Tracks to Success.
It's awesome to be with you, Kraig.
You know what? I can say this. I feel like this is proof of the power of social media, because here I am. I'm flipping through my phone. I'm looking on LinkedIn at various things, checking up on some of my people, and then all of a sudden I see this. I see you, and I see this brand new business, and I'm like, wait a second. I didn't see that coming. Congratulations on it. Story Smart. We're going to talk a lot about that, but the power of social media is real.
It is, and this the fact that we're doing this,
Yeah.
this. What is this? Is this radio? Is this TV? Like, what is it? Yeah, it's extraordinary. There are days that I'm like, oh my gosh, it's just amazing what happens because of connections online.
Yeah, no question about it. So I'm going to do something a little different with this episode because of you. And I don't do this with all the other guests. I want to celebrate your business venture, Story Smart. And I'm going to create the story along the way of the entire journey. So I'm going to ask you about a lot of different stories. We're going to talk about story in all those terms. Here, this might be a little difficult. In its shortest form, maybe a couple of minutes time, tell our audience about the Ron Watermon career story. Can you do that in 2 minutes?
Yeah, I'll do my best. I've had career ADD. I don't know what I want to be when I grow up. I'm still growing up. I started out thinking I wanted to go into film. I ended up, my student aid got cut. I ended up pivoting. I got my degree in journalism and political science. Dabbled around a little bit, ran for student government, got elected, and then ended up doing a fellowship program right out of college, which was a public affairs fellowship program called the Coro Fellows Program. Got placed on a political campaign. Was the only person that knew how to use a computer, and they recruited me. The candidate won. I had a diplomacy skill set, and I became sort of like the diplomat, if you will, that would deal with the legislative process. And anyway, long story short, along the way, I went to law school, got married, passed the bar exam, and ended up landing at the St. Louis Cardinals because they needed somebody with my exact skill set, somebody that could deal with St. Louis City, St. Louis County, and the state of Missouri. And they were trying to build a new ballpark, and it was supposed to be a 9-month project, and it ended up being 17 years and 18 baseball seasons. And yeah, left at the All-Star break in 2018, started my own thing, and have never looked back. Have loved every minute of it.
It'll be a success if you never do look back. But if you look back favorably, I think that's actually a part of success. Great job. Here's my thing. How come many people, and I see this in my workshops and interactive keynotes, they can't come up in front of an audience and tell their story? They can't do it quickly. They don't know the highs. They don't know the lows, or they don't want to talk about them. Why is that a struggle for people, do you think?
A lot of people, they're not media trained, one, right? Like, if they're an introvert like me, it doesn't come naturally. Like, so between the time that we connected on social media yesterday and today, I've given it a lot of thought. Like, all right, well,
Yeah.
what do I want to say, right? Like, because I'm not used to talking about myself. A lot of people aren't,
Hmm.
and so you want to go in prepared. I
Hmm.
think it's just one of those things that it's look, it doesn't come naturally. It's like anything else, you can learn it, right? Like,
Yeah.
I defy the person who picks up a golf club for the first time and drives it perfectly, right? Like,
Hmm.
things take practice, and I believe in the 10,000 hour rule, and
Yeah.
you got to put in the work and chop wood and carry water and do all that stuff, right? Like, and so, and having worked in politics and advised elected officials, having worked, in baseball, and really been the guy behind the guy, or
Hmm.
behind the gal, it's been, you got to come prepared, and you got to coach people, and you got to, understand your audience, and try to connect at an empathetic level.
I was actually talking to a film producer, content producer, working with a company, and they were putting out this big video campaign for a new brand. And I was going to be there as a consultant, helping them on the project, coaching up the people who were going to be on camera and have to deliver, et cetera, et cetera. And so the guy calls me because he was asked to get a little knowledge about me. And he says, it's great to chat with you. Don't know that much about you. I'm going to put you on the spot, Craig. I said, okay. He said, I want you to tell me your life story in 3 sentences. That's literally what he said to me.
Oh
And I
gosh.
said, all right, no problem. I said, I chased a childhood dream and achieved it. I've faced a lot of challenges along the way, pivoted, and I'm proud of it. I'm happier than I've ever been, and I look to do great things in the future. He says,
Wow,
I can't
dude.
believe you just did that. And I said, you want to know something? I coach people on story. I teach people the value of knowing their story. And most people don't give you a lot of time in the first place to be able to share what your story is. Now, here's the other thing I think about story, and I want to ask you this question. I think when we tell our story, we need to do it in a compelling way that creates follow up questions. In other words, if I share, hey, I chased a childhood dream and achieved it, well, then somebody's going to say, well, what was the dream and how did it all happen? Right. If I then say I faced a lot of challenges along the way, I pivoted and I'm really proud of it, then we're going to ask me about what my pivots are and what were those challenges. I'm happier than I've ever been, and I look to do great things in the future. What are your new dreams? What are your new aspirations? So I think story is got to be something that's compelling and teasing as much as it is informative. What say you?
I totally agree. And there needs to be forethought put into the structure of structuring your story. Because I will tell you, because I do have real ADD, like I can be meandering, right? Like
Mm,
the way my brain works, I want to go off on like a tangent and drill
mm,
down on things. So having some structure around it, it's like the nuns taught me in school, you got to outline your story, right? Like,
mhm,
having just
mhm,
written a book, it was, it's hard. I'm more of what you would call a pantser, right? If you've ever talked to authors, they talk about being a plotter or a
yeah.
pantser.
Mhm,
I'm sort of in between because I know I need to plot more, but I feel like I'm just naturally a pantser, and
mm,
so there really needs to be structure to the story and some thought to it. And the most important thing, audience. Like, who
mm.
are you talking to?
Yeah, absolutely.
And what do they care about? I mean, and that's where, candidly, it's funny how life works. Like, that's how the lobbying really helped me. I'll never forget walking into the office of a legislator, and he was like, I started giving him my pitch or whatever, and he said, "Are you new to this?" I'm like, "Yeah, I am." Yeah, help me out here. He goes, "I just do whatever my caucus tells me. So you just need to go to the leadership of the Republican Party and talk to them about it, and they'll just tell me how to vote. And you don't even need to waste your time. But I like meeting you. And
Yeah,
it was
yeah,
it
yeah.
was wonderful. I was like, I that was really helpful. And The other piece of feedback that he gave me is always be ready to answer the what's in it for me.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a nugget that I've taken with me. And even when I was handling things at the Cardinals, when somebody would come into my office asking for a Facebook post or I'll go on Fox 2 or whatever,
Mm-hmm.
I would drill down right away. What's the purpose of the communication? What is it you're wanting to achieve? Why
Right.
should anybody care? Who's the target audience? Just really trying to get clear about those things. And then, okay, let's craft the message from there. And let's figure out whether or not what you want is the right thing to do, what versus, hey, it might make more sense to do something else.
You said audience first always.
Audience first.
Yep, I believe that as well. I'll also believe everything begins with when they're gone. What will they say about what you said? What will they talk to others about what you shared? And most importantly, how will they feel after they've heard you? I think that's really important, or heard your story. And so I'll bring people up in a workshop or in a keynote speech at the very beginning, and I'll say, "Hey, here's your audience. I want you to tell them who you are and why they should care." And a lot of people get stumped by that. They don't have the answer to that. So I don't think this is going to stump you. Talking about the story, and I said my childhood dream, and I chased it. What was yours? What's the story of your dream when you were younger? Was it to potentially be a communications guy? Was it to be in film and screenplay? Was it to be an author? Was it to be an entrepreneur? I mean, you've got all these things.
Yeah. Honestly, as a little boy, it was to be a filmmaker.
Huh.
And if I go back before that, it was to be Superman, candidly, because I had never seen television until I was 5 years old. My dad died. We lived in Spain.
Oh, man.
We came home, and I remember seeing television really for the first time and watching the adventures of Superman. And I remember my mom asking, like, what do you want to be when you grow up? And I said, well, I want to be Superman. She goes, well, he's an actor. And I was like, okay, well, then I want to be an actor, you
Mm.
know?
Yeah, yeah.
And then, years later, I was like, yeah, I don't really want to be an actor. I saw Star Wars and I was like, holy cow, how did they do that? I want to do this. And that's really what I wanted to do. But I sort of settled. Like, I ended up doing the journalism thing because I was like, that's the next closest thing. I was always interested in politics too. I mean,
Hmm.
I remember coming home from kindergarten and on TV watching the Watergate hearings and,
Hmm.
with my mom and just thinking it was fascinating. And then 1976, I would have been 9 years old, the bicentennial, and I was just enamored with the whole bicentennial and the founding of the country. So I was always pulled in two different directions: the political side of things and then the film side of things. And it's funny that I've kind of come full circle and I'm back to where I started in a sense.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's really cool. So you talked about the journalism degree. Um, you don't regret that, right? I mean, in
Oh, heck
college,
no.
I think we always think back to, I wish I also could have done this when I was in school. I wish I had a business degree to go along with journalism. But what about you?
No, it's something, it's funny when I was at the Cardinals, I was like, oh, thank God I did all those things at Lindenwood. I was a stringer for the newspaper. I worked at the radio station. I used to do the CNN headline minute. We didn't have a teleprompter, so I had to memorize it.
Oh,
It was very hands-on. And I think back to all of the things that I learned, including the architecture of a story, like, the inverted pyramid and how to write. I thought I was a good writer, and then my first teacher taught me that I really didn't know what I was doing, and could improve. And it's been a process of continuous improvement ever since.
all right, we're going to segue into sports here. And by the way, when we talk Cardinals, if you are watching this podcast, you'll notice that I've got the red on. That's in honor of you, by the way.
Thank you.
And okay, so um,
Yeah, don't read in anything with the blue.
yeah, I won't do
Yeah, I
that.
don't want anybody watching this go, is he a Cubs fan now?
No, I wouldn't think that. St. Louis Cardinals. All right. That's pretty darn awesome. And it would be a dream job for a whole lot of people. In a nutshell, in a quick story, before we take our first break, I want you to tell people what you felt when you landed the job with one of, honestly, Major League Baseball's most proud and distinguished franchises.
I was absolutely giddy. Like I could not believe it. It was I was so excited. I mean, I was so excited because look, I peaked athletically in the fourth grade, like in kickball, right? And for me to be able to go to work for a baseball team, and that's Camelot in St. Louis.
Yeah,
In St. Louis, it's like
I
the top of
know.
the. I mean, it's a baseball town first. It's the one thing that we all agree on, right?
Yeah.
Like you could debate Provel cheese to your death, but the Cardinals, I mean, it was cool. But my first day was 9/11. And
Mm.
I remember being so excited and driving in, and I never listened to the radio in the morning because my commute was so short to my other job. And I hear this thing about the plane, and then
Oh,
I'm sitting in the lobby, and the FedEx guy comes in and tells Marilyn, the lady that runs the front desk, that a second airplane hit the World Trade Center. And then, it was, yeah, it was a unique experience, and one that, well, I'll never forget. It On the one hand, I was excited about my new job, but on the other side of things, I was afraid, like everybody else, about, well, what's going on. I remember they sent everybody home, and the IT guy came to my office to like set up my computer, and he was like, I've run the math, and if the arch falls, and I was like, is this guy serious? Like, I didn't.
wow.
Yeah, I remember just feeling conflicted, like,
Mm.
about like, all right, should I be excited about this thing? And the world changed that day in profound ways.
Tracks to Success is proud to have the support of Ahead, true innovators in premium headwear. For more than 25 years, Ahead has been outfitting golfers and supplying headwear for the game's most prestigious events. Head over to aheadshop.com and explore their incredible collection of major championship golf hats. And don't miss their lineup featuring your favorite college teams. If you're looking to dress for success, Ahead is the perfect brand for you. So think ahead and look for it at pro shops and special events across the country. And how about this? For listeners of Tracks to Success, Ahead is offering one of its biggest discounts ever. Visit aheadshop.com and use the code TTS30. That's TTS30 to get not 20% off your purchase, but 30% off. That's right, 30% off with code TTS30. Ahead, the finest in headwear and the official headwear of the Tracks to Success podcast. Available now at aheadusashop.com. We're talking with Ron Watermon. He's the founder of Story Smart, and he spent nearly 2 decades with the St. Louis Cardinals. I want to take a deeper dive into that a little bit. You talked about day one, and I mean that almost just makes you stop in your tracks. What's the story of your run there long term? I mean, I can throw some things out there. You spearheaded the organization into digital media and content and did great things with broadcasting. I know some of these things because I had reached out to you years ago because my son and I have family in St. Louis. He's a big Albert Pujols guy, all of that sort of stuff. So I was kind of bugging you, but what would you say is the story of your run? I mean, All-Star game there, Albert Pujols there. There's a lot to dive into.
It was absolutely magical. It was a transformative experience for me. My life changed in profound ways. I count myself lucky to have been part of the organization. It helped me see the world in a different way. It helped me see myself in a different way. I was very proud. I still look back at some of the things that we accomplished, and I say we because it wasn't me, it was we. It was very much a team. And, I had a deep sense of belonging, which was something that, that Mark Lamping, frankly, the man that hired me, fostered at the team. And I remember when he left being afraid, like, okay, well, what does this mean for me? And Bill DeWitt was fantastic. I mean, he just kept handing me more and
Owner.
more responsibility. And I was able to find myself and I was given the space to create, which is, now I realize as I reflect on my life, that's the thing that gives me the most energy. I love creating things. I love taking a vision and making it reality. And I was given the space to do that. And, I'm just internally grateful for the time that I spent there. And feel like that I made a few contributions along the way that made the place better. The TV show I created is still on. That's good, right?
Yeah. What is that? What is that?
It's Cardinals Insider with Ozzie Smith.
Okay.
We took over what was the Cardinal Nation show on KSDK, which is the NBC affiliate
Yeah.
here, which was a residual of if the broadcast rights used to be on, they were split. Anyway, long story short, we took over the production of the show. We rebranded it as Cardinals Insider, which was actually our Twitter name for what it's
Okay.
worth when
Okay.
Twitter became a thing. Because Major League Baseball had their own Twitter account, and we had our own, and we wanted to differentiate ourselves that it was actually coming from the team versus from the league. So Cardinals Insider. The first year, the young lady who did our social media was the host. She was fantastic. And then we recruited Ozzy to host the show. But it's funny, like I never really set out to get into TV production. I really set out to we need to be sharing our story more with fans directly through our website, because we had 13.7 million people going to our website every day during the baseball season. But we had no way of we didn't really have the infrastructure to create the content. And so I was given the opportunity to help build a whole department. There was no communications department. We built it. So anyway.
The website is such a brand opportunity, such a storytelling opportunity, especially today when it's not always the easiest thing to get media attention. They're distracted to other things, and you're trying to figure out how can we get ours. Forbes actually listed the Cardinals among the top Major League Baseball franchises in terms of digital and social media engagement. So you just proved my point when you said all those people, millions of people are going to the website and looking at this stuff.
Yes.
It's a crazy baseball town, but it also gave you a chance to really build on something that would draw attention from people.
Yeah, and it's weird, like how my political background helped. One of the things that we ended up doing that I'm very proud of, and you can sort of see a picture of Stan in the background with President Obama, and then a little flat Stanley next to my Mizzou cap, my Mizzou law cap.
MIZ.
Yeah, MIZZOU. We did the Stand for Stan campaign, which was a campaign to try to connect generations and convince the President of the United States to award Stan Musial the Medal of Freedom. It was something that, candidly, after the All-Star game, I felt like a complete failure, because 2 years before the All-Star game, Senator Kit Bond came to us, and this was at the twilight of the Bush administration, and Mr. DeWitt was very close to President Bush. And the senator said, "Hey, are you familiar with the Medal of Freedom?" Of course, I didn't know anything about it. He's like, "Look, it's like becoming a knight in England." He's like, "I want to get it for Stan. I'm hopeful that Mr. DeWitt's connections, we can lobby the president and make it happen." So we quietly tried to do that at the tail end of his tenure. We're not able to do it. The next year, I paid a writer to write a whole story about Stan, justifying why. And then we ran this whole campaign. And then when the president said he was coming to the All-Star game, we thought, oh, well, this is happening. And it didn't happen. And then as luck would have it, somebody had given me a paper doll, a little flat Stanley. And anyway, long story short, the idea was born of why don't we do this campaign for Stan? We did it. It was one of those things where I'm like, I don't know if this is a good idea or a crazy idea. Sometimes I have a hard time distinguishing between those two things. It turned out to be wildly successful, and the president gave him the Medal of Freedom. Well, you know what that did? It sealed my case as, wow, this guy knows something. And it was just serendipity in a way. It was luck.
Wow.
And it was because we put together this whole internal team. And it was the team building and getting people out there taking a picture with a paper doll. If we would take a picture with a paper doll, and if it was a celebrity and they took a picture, our fans would go crazy, and they would start uploading pictures and signing the petition and lobbying their members of Congress and yada yada yada. But that was transformative. And then that ended up informing almost every single thing that I did from that moment forward in terms of how I approach things.
Okay, you're at a baseball team that's won a World Series, right? You saw a lot of really cool things in your time there. All-Star game, as I mentioned, was in St. Louis. Other things. A lot of people wouldn't really want to leave that gig, but I do understand having an itch and having other things go through your mind. Now, maybe that's ADD for you, but tell me why you left. What was the burning thing inside you that caused you to make such a big pivot?
Good question. Well, people should understand that baseball isn't like the version of George Costanza on Seinfeld. They have this perception that during the season, yeah, you might be a little bit busy and then you have a lot of downtime. You don't. When you're the vice president of communications for the St. Louis Cardinals, you come in at 8 o'clock in the morning and you're there until, a half hour after the media leave the clubhouse when the team's in town. So you work all the time. So you're not with your family. And I remember sitting in the press box one night and thinking to myself, I'm missing my son's games. I love baseball, but I don't love it this much. Like I love the work that I was doing. But I didn't like, I felt like I had accomplished everything I could accomplish. I mean, I built a department, I set up a digital archive, I pushed, I basically created our approach to social media, right? Started a TV show. And prior to that, helped build the Cardinals Authentics business with Vicki Bryant. That is a multi-million-dollar a year business. Learned a ton, but I felt like I had sort of like, okay, did that, check. What am I going to do next? Where am I going to spend the rest of my life? And for me, it was very important to be in my son's life because I did grow up without a father. So it was super, super important to me to be able to be around and not missing my son's games to be at the Cardinal games. And so, I didn't have a totally clear idea of what I wanted to do when I got out. But I had a general idea. Like I wanted to help businesses do basically what the Cardinals had done. Started to shift their approach to communications. We were set up to basically spoon feed information to the media, but we needed to also directly give that information to our fans.
Control your content.
Correct. Yes. And so I started my business. I really focused on trying to help a small business or a nonprofit do exactly what the Cardinals did. Really focused on social media and video storytelling. And I've been growing the business ever since. I started really in that sort of that value space of like, all right, I think I have shared online that we recruited almost 300 one-person band TV reporters to bring what I call brand journalism style storytelling, which is basically a reporter shows up, interviews somebody, and produces a package story, and then you share it. What's beautiful about that is you can do it very quickly. And as opposed to a scripted model, which is what the advertising world is sort of built on. It's a very top heavy, let's get into a room and whiteboard this thing, right? And that's got its place. Trust me, that has its place. But when you're just trying to get more and more content out there and tell if you're a plumbing company or you're a nonprofit, you need to tell the story, right? Like, why do people write a check to nonprofits? Because of the story. They want to feel connected to the mission. And so what's the best way to do that? Through storytelling, period. And so that's really the focus. That became the initial focus, and now I've grown into this sort of higher end side of things because I see more value for that because it's all about IP these days. I mean, everybody's so focused on AI, but trust me, it's about IP, intellectual property.
Yeah.
In addition to hosting this podcast, Kraig leads the Kann Advisory Group, focused on elevating communication for companies and individuals. Company consulting, team and individual workshops, mind-altering virtual programs. To learn more and to find out why the Elevate workshop has been labeled the most powerful experience in leadership communication, visit cannadvisory.com. And when you do connect, mention the Tracks to Success podcast to receive your special discount. Now, back to the interview.
We're talking with Ron Watermon. He was the former head of communications for a big power brand in Major League Baseball, made a big pivot. I want to get back to one story that you just told about the why behind your what, which was leaving Cardinals and starting your own business. And you talked about your son and wanting to spend more time and see games. On a personal level, I think a lot of executives or leaders, doesn't matter, female, male, parents, okay? They sometimes wait until it's too late. Like they'll tell the story that, you know what, I wanted to be with my son at his games, or I wanted to watch my daughter at dance, or I wanted to travel with the travel baseball team or travel volleyball team. And they miss out on that stuff. And sometimes they wait until it's too late. And the kids don't necessarily know what the adults are going through in their minds, and the real tussle that they have about trying to become successful and continue to provide for a family, but want to have that be at home situation. That seems very real for you. I know it was for me. I
Oh
was
my
traveling
gosh.
all the time.
It's really real for me. I mean, I have a wife who's a juvenile diabetic, and she's had control issues. It's part of why I left Mizzou after the first year of law school and transferred to the evening program at SLU and finished in the
Mm,
evening program. Um, you know, for me, it's very real. And actually, about 6 weeks before I left the team, and this was a huge thing for me. I'd been on a call with the commander of the police department downtown, a woman named Renee Kreisman, about she called me about road closures around the 4th of July or something. And
mhm,
anyway, long story short, she hangs up and I'm getting this like message, and I answer the phone and it's my son in the back seat of my wife's car. And my wife is in a diabetic reaction. So she's driving the vehicle and he's little. And they're supposed to be out at one of his baseball games, actually. And
mm.
instead, they're like in the central west end of St. Louis. Anyway, long story short, I get Renee on the phone. And with her help, we're able to track her down. And she's like, "Do you have the Life 360 app?" I was like, "I don't even know what that is." I do now, by the way. And the long story made very short is I got my wife home, put her to bed, made sure her blood sugar was good, calmed my son down. And then I turned around and went back to the office because it was the night of the baseball draft and Mr. DeWitt was there. And,
Mm.
I was there until like 1 o'clock in the morning and then came home, went to bed, got up and was back at the office at 8 a.m. And I remember sitting in the press box, the next night and thinking to myself, like, this is, I, there's a point with the Cardinal thing. It's like other people think I have a cool job, and there's a little bit
Sure.
of like aura that comes with that, right? Like as
Yeah.
my son
Yes.
uses that term now, aura, about YouTubers and stuff. He's got aura, bro. And I'm like, okay, but there's a little bit of this. Like
Yeah.
for me, I think I stayed as long as I stayed because other people thought I had a cool job. And they
Sure.
thought I was cool because of, like there's this glow, like, because I'm next to Albert Pujols or I'm next to Yachty or
Right.
whatever. And I like that. Don't get, I'm not immune to that, right? Like,
Yeah.
but at the end
Right.
of the day, that's not really what drives me. Like, it isn't. And being around my family and being there for my family is so much more important. And I also want to like look back on my life and feel like I made a difference. And so
There you
that's
go.
what,
There you
and
go.
I have to be creatively challenged. Like doing the same thing over and over again, I am not that person for that job. If you want somebody that does the same thing every single day, do not hire me for that. I can't function well with that. And there's a routine in baseball, which
Yeah.
is wonderful. But for me, what really motivated me year after year was the ability to build a department, to create a TV show, we did, I think, the first Instagram video series. It was when Instagram added video because of Vine. Do you remember Vine?
Oh,
You
of
know,
course.
I had convinced everybody in the front office to lay down and spell out yachty 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 with their bodies for on Vine, because we were trying to get people to vote for Yachty for the
Yadier
All-Star
Molina.
game.
Yeah.
And then, a few months later, we created an Instagram series that was a mockumentary of the TV show The Office because Phyllis Smith was coming into town and was going to throw out a first pitch. And I had a friend reach out about that. And I said, well, we're thinking about a funny mockumentary. Would she be willing to do it? And
Yeah.
I'm smart about leveraging people. When Phyllis said yes, I was like, oh, we're in. Then I went to David Freese and he was like, Phil Smith said, "Oh yeah, I'm in." Fred Bird, he was easy, like he's a no-brainer. But once you start having them, and I'm like, Bill DeWitt can't say no, right? Mo, who seems
Sure.
very
Yeah.
buttoned up,
Peer
he's not
pressure.
saying no, you
Right.
know. And yeah, so it was stuff like that that kept me
The
going.
cool job is for real though. Like for years. Now my kids were younger at the time when I was on Golf Channel every night, right? But to the older people, wow, that's the greatest job ever. You're at all these major championships. You're at the Ryder Cup. You're traveling around. You're this, you're that. And I was at the Masters almost any year I wanted to be able to be at the Masters. A lot of different times. Now I'm just like everybody else. I get the email back from Augusta National that says, sorry, you didn't get it this year. You don't get tickets to go to the
Right,
Masters,
right,
right?
right.
So I don't have the cool job anymore, but my kids probably would really benefit if I was doing it now. They're older. They'd love it. So I think
That was the downside because Charlie's like, well, why'd you quit?
yeah, right. Right.
Right?
Now he can drive himself to games, and it's like, can I get some tickets? No, not necessarily so. Okay, so my question is this. What's the story, not about you leaving, but what would you say did you learn about yourself in having the strength, if you will, to make a decision like that and then launch a brand of your own?
I am a entrepreneur. I would have never ever thought that. Like I would have never used those words like a startup entrepreneur.
Mm-hmm.
I basically started up and ran a startup in the organization. I was given the space to do that. And as I reflected on my life, I realized, oh my gosh, I've done this since I was a little kid. Like I would get my friends to do stuff. I would convince people to do different things. Like in college, I started Project Peace, which was a Soviet exchange program. Like, I've always done these things. And it's the thing that makes me tick. It stokes my fire. And I don't mind failing because I don't like that word because everything's a learning, and I have this, and oh God, it annoys my wife to no end. I can't help but debrief things like in my own mind. Like if I would do this, like in our kitchen,
Mm-hmm.
it annoys her that I always point out the things I would do differently, basically the stuff that's wrong, right? Our
Mm-hmm.
kitchen when we designed it. That's just who I am. Like it's just who I am. And I realized all those things when I was there.
Hmm. Well, you bet on yourself, and a lot of people don't necessarily have the true strength to say, you know what? I know I've got talent. I know I can do great things for an organization, but would I really be able to make it if I went off on my own? Like they believe in themselves, but they won't bet on themselves because ultimately they're only going to get paid how they create a successful business at that point. And that's not easy. So I want you
That's
to tell me
hard.
about, yeah, and
That's
it's
hard.
really hard. There's no doubt about it. I want you to tell me about Story Smart. Okay. What's in the name? I mean, obviously, I understand it, but tell me what's in the name.
Um, it's about for me, it's there's a right way to do things. There's a smart way to do things. And one of the
Okay.
main insights that I gained working for the St. Louis Cardinals is this idea of intellectual property and this idea of using professionals. So, like, I think it's awesome that you can self publish a book. I think it's awesome that more media is created by the masses today than mass media.
Mm,
I think that's
okay.
awesome. The fact that we're doing this podcast is a great example of the modern media landscape, right? Like you can do that. That's awesome. For me, what I see is there's real value in professional approaches to doing things. And it's not an either or. It's you can do both. It's not binary, right? It's like you either hire a professional to do it or you do it yourself.
Mhm.
There's a way for me. Story Smart is about it's about, well, what if you hired the professional and you own it as though you did it yourself? And for me, it's funny. I think of this one person, and he doesn't know this, but he's going to know now if he's watching this podcast. J.R. Moehringer. He's cousins with my friend McGraw Milhaven. He's a brilliant ghostwriter, brilliant writer, and he wrote Andre Agassi's book. He wrote
Well,
Prince Harry's book. He wrote Shoe Dog, the story of Phil Knight. From Nike, and the idea of the ghostwriter is really what's behind Story Smart. It's the idea of why don't we bring in the best of the best to tell your story, but you own it as though you did it yourself. That's it. That's the simple value proposition. That is it. And so, what does it take to make the most of your story? You have your memories, but it's a blob, right? It's a blob of ideas, but in the hands of a great, Ken Burns would do a better job doing your documentary than you would. 9 times out of 10,
sure. Of course.
right?
Right.
Steven
Right.
Spielberg, would do a better job. Reese Witherspoon would,
Mhm.
and trust me, if my book, if I had JR write, story smart storytelling for all, it'd be a lot better. It's good. I don't want to discount my,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
the ideas in it are fantastic. But there's something to that. And for me, that's what story smart's all about.
Okay. There are a lot of people that don't see the value, and I use the term value on purpose, the value in their own story. Now, one of the things, as I understand it, about your business is you're really trying to show people the true value of ownership of their story. We go back to IP, right?
Correct.
So you're a filmmaker now, and cinematography, the whole bit, telling a story, there's value in that for people. Why don't they understand there's value in their story?
Oh, that's a good question. I think some people do, right? Like, Taylor Swift does, right? Like there are people at the top of the game, people that are inside the industry that understand the financial value of storytelling. Look at every actor that starts their own studio. Why did they do that? Because they want to be an owner. They don't want to work for somebody else. They want to own it. There's real financial value. There's real monetary value in the business of storytelling. It's an almost $3 trillion global industry. There will be 23,000 years worth of stories consumed just today globally on Netflix. That's one platform. That would take, in other words, it'd take one person, 23,000 years without bathroom breaks, right? Hitting pause to watch everything, right? That's consumed. So there's real financial value in all of that stuff. This Paramount merger, right, with Skydance that was just approved. There's real financial value at stake in stories. You worked as a journalist. There's mega value in the IP of media. And so that fundamental premise is what's behind Story Smart. It's like, I wanted you to be, all right, since we are now all media outlets, let's start to think like media outlets. Which kind of dovetails well with this whole NIL thing, right? Which I sometimes call nil, and my son corrects me. But suddenly that's now on people's radar, right? Like, and athletes understand that their name and image and likeness have value because it's all about sponsorship deals, right? Like they want to get paid. It's like, hey, I'm plugging the pizza parlor, right? But what they don't realize is that their actual story, like the news story that's written about them, right? That stuff has value. And there are baseball players, one in particular, and I can't say the name, but who told a friend of mine that does alumni relations for the Cardinals. He's like, look, if a journalist ever comes in and says they want to write my story, tell them to go F themselves, because all they're really trying to do is make money for themselves. They don't want to cut me in. And what I would say about that is there's probably a more diplomatic way to go about that and say that. But I understand that point of view because that's my target. It's somebody that has their memories and they know that there's value in sharing that, right? Ozzie Smith has an amazing story. Somebody would watch his documentary, but the challenge that he has is he doesn't own his name, image, or likeness playing baseball. Major League Baseball does. So for him, one of the largest cost items would be licensing from Major League Baseball to get that backflip on opening day, that go crazy folks home run, right? Like that stuff. So and I ran into this as the VP of communications. I remember Matt Holliday was supposed to appear at Macy's, and there was a cease and desist letter that was sent by Major League Baseball because he was wearing a Cardinal jersey. And so Macy's had to white it out because they didn't deal with Major League Baseball for licensing. Right.
Oh,
and so,
wow.
Yeah. And it's funny, like this documentary that I'm directing, this shows you how long it's been since I've been in the business. We're about to sit down to interview this woman. She's wearing a Cardinal shirt. And my DP said, "Are you going to ask her to change?" And I'm like, "Yes, I am." Not that I couldn't talk them into granting a license, but those are the types of things that people don't think about that stuff, right? And athletes don't. None of them do. And most people don't realize they don't own their wedding photos. The photographer does. They just have a limited license. So if they want to use their wedding photos in their documentary, guess what? They have to go to, the wedding photographer and get permission, right? Like most people don't even understand, like you hire an ad agency, guess who owns it? The ad agency. You have a limited license, right? Like nobody understands this stuff. I didn't. Trust me, I'm a lawyer. I was like a year and a half into managing the photography for the Cardinals. And I was like, oh, we need to make sure that we actually own the copyright on these photos, and we got to the point where they had to put it into the metadata of their camera, right? Like, because it's like, hey, we're spending $500,000 a year on contract photography. We're going to own these darn things,
A non-practicing lawyer with a pretty darn good story. You might need to call on that a few more times to help people along the way.
Yeah. Yeah, that's why I have a nephew who's a professional soccer player. I'm like, make sure to get your own picture on a work for hire agreement. Get your URL.
Looking for a guest speaker for your next event or annual conference? Kraig's message is inspiring and empowering. Visit kraigkannspeak.com to learn more about his topics and find out about his green shoe experience. It's a day your people will talk about long after he's gone. So visit kraigkannspeak.com and mention the Tracks to Success podcast to receive your special discount. Now, back to the show.
We are talking with Ron Watermon. This podcast, Ron, is called Tracks to Success. And what I talk about with every guest that comes on this show, very few, I can't even think of one off the top of my head that is truly, except for maybe a broadcaster who always wanted to be a broadcaster, and that's exactly where their line is. Mike Tirico being one of them. Joe Buck's been on here. There's a lot of ups and downs. There's a lot of pivots along the way. What's the thing that stands out the most that you've learned about your journey or about yourself in your journey?
That's tough. For me, the single most important thing is to be clear in my own mind what I want. So do you know Donald Miller? He wrote the Story Brand.
Yeah. Story Brand. The funny thing is, if anybody is watching this podcast and they saw me look to my right just a few moments ago, is because I have the book and I was going to hold it up. So keep going. I'd love to have it on the podcast, but it's not easy to do. Okay. So there you go. Donald, if you're watchwatching, here's an invitation.
Come on. I love the man. I follow him on social media. I was getting his emails. I'm not exactly, remind me what the question was.
Go ahead and read his Marketing Made Easy as well. That's
Marketing Made Easy. I have all his books.
Okay, they're good. All right.
I watched the movie that he made, right?
Here's the question.
Yeah.
The question was that the track to success is not a straight line for most people because there's pivots, because there's ups and downs. What's the thing that stands out that you've learned about yourself and about the word journey that you could share with other people?
Okay, so this is where Donald comes into where my brain went. Sorry. He had this email thing and he would send it out to people and he's like, we did all this research about like what makes people successful and what's the one trait that everybody has in common. And, sometimes there's smart people that are successful. Sometimes there's people that aren't smart that are successful, right? Like there's a mix bag. And he said bias towards action. I was like, I remember like that hit me like a ton of bricks. Because I was like, I'm screwed because I have a bias towards thinking about shit. I have a bias for overanalyzing.
Most people do.
Yeah. And I'm like, that coupled with knowing what I want, when I can combine those two things and not sweat the small stuff, that's when I'm on the right path. And when I've built teams, that's the other thing. It's who, not how. So who can you bring that will take this idea to the next level? And it's really who and how, right? There's something to process. I do believe in having a plan, and I do believe in you got to chop wood and carry water, and you got to iterate and learn and all those buzzwords. But for me personally, it's just knowing what I want and then being able to see the path. Seeing the path is sometimes hard. Sometimes I know what I want, but I don't like it helps me to understand like, well, what are the steps? And I can be very literal, because even with my book designer, I'm like, I want a screenshot guide, It's just like when I
Hmm.
got my first iPhone right before we were doing the White House visit, I was like, I literally went on to Amazon after getting my phone and was Googling like, where's the manual that didn't because it was supposed to be intuitive. I was like, there's
Oh my
like a
gosh.
toilet paper square versus, of instructions. And anyway,
Well, I've got a couple things I want to ask you before we go. All right. This podcast is also about helping other people find their own journey and their own tracks to success. You mentioned entrepreneur, and entrepreneurial mindset is something I challenge people with all the time. Don't really care what our business title is. At the end of the day, we all need to be an entrepreneur. And at the beginning of the day, we need to carry ourselves like an entrepreneur, have no fear, push ideas, take ownership for ourselves, not be afraid to fail, all those different things. All right. So I speak about that. I tell people they need to be the CEO of themselves. They also need to be their
right.
own chief marketing officer as well, because other people don't have the time or the care to do it for them. So, taking ownership of your own story is a really big thing. What would you tell people about the importance of that? Taking ownership of your own story and your own journey.
That is absolutely essential. It's my life's mission. I mean, honestly, it's my life's mission. I love this CEO of themselves because one of the fundamental premises behind Story Smart is I want you to think like a studio executive on your story. I want you to
Mhm.
be at that ownership level, but I want you to recognize where you have gaps and that you can't do this alone and that you should build a team to help you do it in
Mhm.
the right way. So I want you to be
Mhm.
the CEO, but I want you to like, look, if you're not good at finances, bring in a CFO, right? Like if you're not good at the day to day, bring in
Yeah,
a
that's right.
COO, right? Build a team. And that's what like, as I look back on my life and look at the things that I've been really successful with, it's always been things, it was never something I did by myself. It's always
Mhm.
been something that it's a team of people. And I would suggest to you that I don't care if it's an individual athlete that's achieved some greatness, whether they're a golfer, a tennis player, baseball player. Trust me, there's a team behind the person that you see, right?
Yeah.
There really
Yeah.
is. And you need to have that team. And it's who and how. It's process and people and surround yourself with the best.
Yeah. Last thing. Um, you're a journalist and you're a guy who was around a lot of writers who had to figure out what the lead story was for every game, our producer on this podcast, Max, he's a hopeful sportscaster someday, right? And I
God
coach
bless
those
Max.
kids once a month. That's right. And I tell them, look, by the time you get on local news at 6 o'clock or 10 or 11, most people that are true sports fans have already watched the game. So they already know the stats, they already know the highlights. That your job is to tell the story of the game. What did it mean? All of that. Give them the headline. What are they going to need to remember about that game? So I like to say, I don't want to bury the lead. I don't want to bury the lead here for you as we head out. When people tell a story, you got to have a headline and an attention grabber. Do you think about your own headline? What would you say that headline would be for Ron Waterman?
Oh gosh. The truthful answer is no, I don't think about it, and I probably should. Um, he cared about people and wanted the best for all of them. I mean, there's a reason I have for all in my book title, and I've struggled with that with my business. I believe in that, um,
Mm.
and so, yeah, for me, it would be to bring story for all, for people to own their story and make the most of it for themselves. And their
Yeah, I
loved
think you've
ones.
got
Really,
it.
at the end of the day, for their loved ones. It's not about the money. It's about being remembered. And that's really what drives me. I mean, I lost my dad, as I mentioned, as a boy. And,
Hmm.
candidly, there was a period with my business. I really wanted to get into legacy videos and spent a fair amount of money
Mm.
developing that. And here's what I've learned. It's usually not the person themselves that cares about that story. It's their loved ones. It's like
Mm.
I want my dad's story told, right? But dad's like,
Yeah,
who wants
right.
that, right?
Correct. Correct.
And but yeah, I'm guilty of that too. Is by evidence of my answer to your question, right? Like thinking about that. So I think the fact that you're posing the question is an important one.
I wish you the absolute best with the company. I'm going to be following you. We're going to stay in touch. I need a copy of your book, And
I just
you
ordered
made this.
yours.
I know you didn't need to do that. I would have sent you one and
Yeah.
and put a little note in there. Might still do that. Thank you so much for the time. How can people find you and your business and your brand to have their story told? I'll give you that opportunity.
It's storysmart.net. Storysmart.net. Or Ron Waterman, RonWatermon.com.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hey, thanks so much. I appreciate it. You're awesome.
Thank you.
Friends, success isn't just about the look of your resume. It's about the way you look, and dressing for success in the workplace is important. The way you look out of the workplace is part of your brand as well. Ahead, our official headwear partner, is all about helping you show off your best self. A hat says a lot about you. And Ahead doesn't just follow trends, they set them. Available at pro shops, resorts, and big sporting events around the country, and also online. By listening to this podcast, you get a chance to save big. Visit aheadusashop.com, use the code TTS30, and receive 30% off your order. That's aheadusashop.com, using the code TTS30. 30% off just for you. Ahead, the finest brand in headwear and the official headwear of Tracks to Success. It's time for Getting Ahead. I hope you enjoyed the conversation with Ron. Let's do this, shall we? Let's talk about story. Ron's company is called Story Smart, and I'm going to use that as my jumping off point to have this little conversation. There is nothing more valuable than the story that you author yourself. In my workshops with Kann Advisory Group, we help refine the messages around story to create the most compelling story that ultimately companies and individuals can share with the public. So, what's your story? Do you actually know it? I'm here to tell you that it is currency for connection with other people, and it's valuable in defining the way people look at you and ultimately talk about your brand. Legacy, it's your story, right? Resume, we know that's our story of business and our career. What's the story for you? What are your key steps in the journey? What are the milestones? What are the turning points? What are the successes? What are the failures? Those are important too. Imagine being in an interview and somebody said, "Tell me your story in 1 minute." Actually, how about try 2 minutes? Could you actually do it? This is really important. It's important that you know your story, knowing who you are, what you value, and what you've accomplished. So I challenge you for this. You don't have to write a book, but do yourself a favor and write a chapter. Figure out what your story is. Know it, share it. It's valuable. I guarantee you, your tracks to success will come a whole lot easier. I hope you enjoyed the conversation with Ron Watermon. Another guest next time, right here on Tracks to Success. I'm Kraig Kann.
Don't forget to subscribe to the show for more great interviews and Kraig's thoughts on reaching your highest personal and professional summit. Find it wherever you get your podcast and on the Kraig Kann YouTube channel and kraigkannspeak.com.